Okay, here we are on problem 2. It says find both the lateral area and the surface area of the square pyramid. So first let's start with our lateral area formula. Lateral area is 1/2 times perimeter of the base times that slant height. So let's see if we have enough information to use the formula. So it looks as though I can calculate the perimeter of my base. I've got 9 times 4, right? So I end up with my lateral area is equal to 1/2 times a perimeter around my base of 36, because that's what 9 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9 will be. So 36 times now my slant height. That slant height, remember, is the measurement that would be if we slid down the middle of the face of the pyramid. They didn't actually give us the slant height, so we're going to have to solve for it. Now what I want you to notice here is that we can make a triangle out of the height of the pyramid and the slant height of the pyramid if we simply go ahead and connect these two lines right here. We're making a right triangle since this height is perpendicular to our base. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can figure out this measurement, because I know that if I have two sides on a right triangle, I can use my Pythagorean theorem to figure out the third side. So since this full distance across is 9 and this is in the center of our pyramid, we are going to make the assumption that this is 4.5, that this is exactly half of the width of our base. So now we can use our Pythagorean theorem to figure out this slant height. So in our formula up here, we still don't know that slant height. I'm going to have to do a little bit of math to figure this out. So I'm going to plug in to the Pythagorean theorem. The a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. The a and the b are the two legs that are making the right angle. The 8 and the 4.5. So I've got 8 squared plus 4.5 squared is equal to our slant height squared. So now I'm actually going to go ahead and do some of the squaring here. And I'm going to pull out the calculator for that 4.5 squared. I know 8 squared is 64. Oops. Plus 4.5 times another 4.5 is going to give us 20.25. Is equal to our slant height squared. So now I'll add those two numbers together. I'm going to get 84.25 is equal to that slant height squared. And so now to get rid of that square, remember we have to take the square root on both sides of the equal sign. So I'm going to type in this 84.25 and take the square root of it. And square root, I end up with 9.18 if I round up. There we go. So now I know this slant height, which is really the piece I needed to finish off this formula. So I'm going to continue with this. I'm going to plug in my answer up here. So I've got my lateral area is 1/2 times 36 times that 9.18. And if I use my calculator here, I already have that 9.18 in my calculator, so I'm going to multiply that by the 36 and by that 0.5. I end up with 165.2. I'm just going to round that off. 168.2. That was the correct number. Oh, no, 165.2. Pardon me. Okay. Okay, 165.2. So there's our lateral area. Now we have to find the full surface area. So I'm going to write down my surface area formula. Surface area I know is going to be the base area, and I add to that the 1/2 times the perimeter of the base times the slant height. Now I've already done this calculation. This calculation was done right here, right? The 1/2 times perimeter of the base times slant height. We got 165.2 for this, didn't we? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this with the 165.2. Then all I have to do is add the area of the base to my answer and I'm done. So my surface area is equal to, now again, we have to figure out what shape our base is and then calculate the area of that shape. And our base is a square. So we can just find the area of our square and then we're done. So this is 9 times 9 is going to give us 81 for the area of our square base. And then I'm going to add to that the 165.2. I'll bring back my calculator here. I already have that 165.2 in there. I will add the 81 to that. And it looks like our full surface area is equal to 246.2. And there we go. And we are in inches squared, or square inches. For both answers here, this is also in inches squared. Okay, now let's talk about the lateral area and surface area of the cone in terms of pi. Don't forget, in terms of pi means just leave pi on the end of your answer. You're not typing in 3.14 into the calculator. So first let's talk lateral area. I'm going to write down the formula first. I always write down my formula first, figure out what do I need, do I have enough information, and then I go from there. So for lateral area, I have pi times radius times slant height. So let's start looking for the information. It looks as though I have a radius. Radius is 5. I need the slant height though. They didn't give me slant height. This measurement from the peak all the way down to the base, that is our slant height. If I were to slide down the cone, here's the regular height and this is the slant height, remember. So I do have to figure this out. Now keep in mind we have a right triangle just like in the last problem, and we can solve for that slant height using our Pythagorean theorem. So I am going to write out my Pythagorean theorem over here. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So my a and my b, those are the 12 and the 5. Got 12 squared plus 5 squared is equal to that slant height squared. Now this is always the c. Sorry, that just kind of happened there. The hypotenuse is always the c because it's opposite of the right angle. Whichever side is opposite of the right angle, that's going to be plugged in for the c in your Pythagorean theorem. So I end up with 144 plus 25 is equal to that slant height squared. And so then I get 169 is equal to slant height squared, and 169 square root of that, I end up with 13. Okay, perfect. So the slant height here is 13. So now I'm just going to plug into my formula and I can be done with that lateral area. Notice we had to go through our variables first and make sure we had the numbers that we needed. Once we know we have all the numbers that we need, we can plug them in and be done. So I'm going to go back to this here. We've got lateral area is pi times radius. Radius is 5 times slant height, we know now is 13. So because this needs to be in terms of pi, I'm only going to do 5 times 13. And I'm just going to tack the pi on the end of my answer. So in the calculator here, 13 times that 5 is going to give me 65. So my lateral area is 65 pi. And then that's it. I'm not going to type in the 3.14 in my calculator because I want the answer in terms of pi. Now, the surface area, the formula for that is pi times radius squared. Add to that pi times radius times slant height. So notice I already know what pi times radius times slant height is because we figured this part out already. That was this formula right here. We already figured out pi times radius times slant height. So I'm going to replace this with the 65 pi. So now I know surface area is pi times radius squared. So radius is 5 squared. Add to that my previous answer for lateral area is 65 pi. So here I've got 25 pi. And I'm adding to that 65 pi. So when I add those two numbers together, I'm going to end up with 90 pi. So my surface area is 90 pi. And that's when I leave my answer in terms of pi. And of course, we have to add our unit on the end. This is in meters squared. And this answer was also in meters squared. Okay, last example. Problem 4. Given the lateral area of a cone is 645 pi square feet and the radius is 15 feet, what is the slant height? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify what formula they want me to use. It's always going to be given to you. What formula? Because they're going to tell you exactly which formula it is. Here they're telling you to use lateral area of a cone. So I go back to my formulas and I write down that formula right away. Lateral area for a cone was pi times radius times slant height. So now I get to plug in the information that I know. I know that the lateral area is 645 pi. Don't forget the pi on this number. Pi is a part of this number. You need to take the whole number. I'm going to replace, because they're telling me that this number is equal to that lateral area, right? So in my formula, I'm going to replace lateral area with 645 pi. So I've got 645 pi is equal to, now I've got pi times radius. Let's read through the rest of the words here. It says the radius is 15. So I'm going to replace radius with a 15 times slant height. It says what is the slant height? So I don't know that slant height. I'm going to replace that with a cursive L again. And now I get to solve. Now, I don't want you to run to your calculator right away and type in pi. I don't want you to do that because take a look. There's a pi on each side of the equal sign. If I simply divide both sides by pi, it's going to cancel on both sides. So here the pi is going to cancel, and over here the pi is going to cancel.
Mama.
So now the pi's are gone. We are left with 645 is equal to 15 times the slant height. All we're looking for is that slant height, so now I can just divide both sides by 15 and I can be done. So on the calculator, 645 divided by 15, oops, gives us 43. So 43 is that slant height, and that answers the question.